Welcome, everybody. We're live, sort of live, from a number of locations this morning, all in the northeast part of the United States. It's about 10 in the morning on September 21st, and we've created a Zoom type meeting and tour, both live and through some pre-recorded materials, to come back and finally take a look at a 5-year project for WKNY, Radio Kingston's oldest AM radio station, and quite an adventure and quite a project involving a number of people, of which many of them are on this Zoom session right now. Let me introduce a few of them, and one or two might be coming in a little bit later. Actually, one is coming in right now. Peter, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you?
Fantastic. I just started with an introduction, which I won't do again, about this 5-year adventure, et cetera, and was just about to start introducing everybody. And so what perfect timing. So we're going to start right away. I'm going to introduce a few people. I'm going to jump into a question and direct it right to you. Peter Buffett is founding director of the Novo Foundation. I think I don't have to really give much more introduction about Peter himself. At the radio station are Kyle and Jimmy Buff, Jimmy on the left, wave, Kyle on the right, executive director of the station, longtime Hudson Valley DJ and radio celebrity, and Kale, station technical director, and Jimmy on the left, Kale on the right. In the WSDG universe, Josh is up on the left of the screen, our COO and one of the co-designers. Matt Ballos, lower right, was the heart and soul of this project for years, project manager, et cetera, et cetera. I'm John Storyk, founding partner of WSDG. We may have Kristen Thorne, who's the station business manager, join us a little bit later. Peter has a hard stop in 15 minutes. As I said, it's the morning of September 21st. We're in the Northeast. So I would like to direct this to Peter, since his time is extremely limited. Thanks again for jumping in. I know that your schedule is very precious. Why'd you do this? What did you do, and why did you do this? What's your vision?
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me be a part of this. It really started many years ago, early 2000s, with the realization, of course, of all the consolidation of radio stations across the country and what that was doing to local voices. I lived in Milwaukee at the time, helped launch Radio Milwaukee there, which has gone on to become a very successful local station. But Milwaukee, much larger than Kingston, presented different challenges in terms of scope and scale and aspirations. I came here, I met Jimmy, got to know Jimmy over a number of years, and recognized that the opportunity here was very unique because we had a much smaller community that in these growing times, again, we all know the level of division and anxiety and complexity in terms of getting to know who your neighbor is, and getting to know your local government, and getting people to work with an orientation towards a common goal of building community. And the station seemed like the perfect vehicle to help that process of really knitting neighborhoods and community back together. So after spending a number of years with Jimmy and recognizing our like-mindedness around all of this, and seeing that WKNY was in fact one of those stations. Of course, Warren Lawrence kept it going for many, many, many years and is still there. But through various corporate ownerships and different things, we thought we can bring this back to the community and we can have it hear itself through the station. And so that really was the vision, to bring a local station back to the local people, basically.
Right, prior to your setting up the new business model, it was a sort of a, I would say, a sort of a B AM radio station. It was a Westwood carrier, right? I
I
believe.
think that's right. Yeah.
And you're a Hudson Valley resident, right? You're a full-time resident. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
right. And could you just talk a little bit about how you structured this? I don't want to jump into any private information, but it has certainly changed. I mean, it was my memory of it was, it was kind of like every other Westwood station. And now it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 24/7 original programming, non-commercial. That's quite a leap, Peter.
It is. And of course, again, you look at the world, certainly the way I have seen the world progress over 150 years or so. Not that I'm that old, but there is this
Not that old.
continued subsidizing, either through tax breaks or tariffs or whatever of big industries. And of course, we know the big ones, big ag and the banking and oil and gas and all these things. But radio in its own way has through the process of deregulation and other things become a business model as opposed to a community resource. And so the Novo Foundation has really taken it upon itself on a small scale, because we certainly can't do the kind of work the government and business interests have done. But we can on a small.
That remains to be seen. I'm not quite sure if that's true.
Yeah, we'll see.
Right now.
Yeah, but on a small scale, we can subsidize essentially an alternative way of being in a regional and hyper local, in the case of the station, entity, and that is, I think, critical to the species, frankly, is that we have to start eating food from where we live, hearing voices from where we live, and other things. So it's really this idea that we're taking the leap of saying somebody that has to prop up the other side if we're going to get through this. And the government's doing the work for business. We're going to do the work for the community.
So the Novo Foundation, which is your philanthropic arm, this is public information. Thank you very much, as someone who lives in your community, has converted this station, provided the financial muscle for it to live ad infinitum, commercial free.
Yeah.
That's the good news. But the challenging news is that your requirement is that it's local, it's representative, which means there's lots of languages on it, lots of different, that's your challenge, and also it's 24/7. That's not so easy.
Right. Yeah. No, and it really, I have the firm belief that when the community starts to really feel the benefit of what this station and other things we're working on can bring, we'll find a way to keep it going, and that could take a very long time, frankly. And that's what we're in it for. We're in it for the long haul, knowing that there's such value here that has been lost for so many people, that when it's regained, people will go, you know what, that thing's important. We need it. And what I hope is that we are a model to some extent for other local communities, and that we can, frankly, show a price tag for it, that it's not cheap to necessarily hold it until it becomes the value that it is for the community. But it's critical, it's necessary. And that is the leap I'm making and Novo is making, that there will be a time when the community really goes, okay, how do we pitch in now more and more?
Right. I'm going to stay, if it's okay.
Peter, I actually have a question on that. And
Oh.
What metrics would you use for value? It's not just monetary, correct?
That was my next question.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're succeeding?
Well, that is the question that a lot of people ask me, and my somewhat flippant,
Thanks, Matt.
but absolutely core answer is there'll be more kids playing in the street. So the metric is feeling, and that is what we've lost over again these last 150 years or so. That it is people's innate sense of value and worth and connection, and that will be the metric. And how will I know that? That's, I think, what makes Novo different in Kingston in particular. I'm up there all the time, and others at Novo are in the community living there every day. So we can feel it actually, and you can sense when things are shifting. And so the metric is much more in a place that our culture is not used to, which is less quantitative and much more qualitative.
So you must be extremely happy that the city just put in bike lanes.
Yes, exactly. It's small incremental steps.
To just stay on that, again, your time being limited, does Novo, I mean, Novo is the financial sponsor, but the station is an independent entity. It has leadership. You don't manage the station. I mean, Jimmy and the team are extraordinary. Does Novo require some metrics? I mean, traditional radio metrics are, of course, profit, viewership surveys. I mean, there's all kinds of metrics. Does Novo require, other than everybody feels good and we saw some kids next door playing? I mean, are there some actual metric requirements? And the reason why I ask is, if there are, or whatever they are you using them to share them with other Novos and other radio station projects around the world? Again, consistent with what you just said. If this is a model,
right?
How do you tell people that the model is working?
Yeah, well, so I mean, the metrics really are starting to be proven already in terms of what we would hope. I wouldn't say they're requirements, but again, knowing Jimmy as long as I did before we got involved, I knew that the kind of programming and the depth of looking for voices that might not otherwise be heard was there. And that is proving to be true. I mean, you can look at the schedule and you can see a lot of voices. So that's a metric that I would say essentially was a requirement, but an agreement really that Jimmy and I had going into it. And so there are some aspirations around not only what the radio station does on the air, but at what it can do in the community, help support block parties and live streaming from City Hall and these various things that allow more community participation in ways that the radio station can really be behind. In terms of the model, I am nothing if not patient, and feel that patience is required. You know, we live again in a world of quarterly returns and immediate, all the immediacy is off the charts. And we are growing this slowly and you know, really methodically through these last 3 years and beyond. And eventually I'll be shouting from the rooftops, but I'm very careful that I'm not shouting too soon, because people want to know this. I mean, we have had people coming from almost day one saying, can we tell more people about the station? And it's like, we're not there yet. And we want to really show the complexity, frankly, of what it takes to do this. You know, it's one thing to have the money and the station. It's another to really get the community engaged the way we already are, and I think we'll continue to do.
Well, it hasn't been an easy ride. I mean, when you leave, we're going to talk about the building process, and it certainly was an adventure starting. And you won't be here for that, but you'll see the recording of this. And I think your patience. I'm not sure if the public realizes, you know, for me, you're a musician at heart. I mean, that's how I know you more as a musician, and you go back many, many years. So I think your music bones give you that patience.
Well, I think you're right. Actually, that's a really important point, I think, for Novo at large, and specifically with the station, is I do come from a background, which is why I knew your name from back in 1981, I think. But you know, I come from a background of walking into a room and a client saying, by 4 o'clock, you got to come up with something for this commercial. And so it took me a while to get over the anxiety, but I became comfortable with the unknown, knowing there was going to be an answer that we could get to. And this is what we do writ large at Novo, and specifically with the station, is that I know we're going to get to something that is magical. We already are there in many ways, but that it takes time, and it takes a willingness to go, I'm not sure yet how this is going to go, but let's learn from it and get better at it and keep growing.
Peter,
Well-
can you talk a little bit about the incubation process, getting into this with Jimmy in the early days and the ideation of, you know, who pitched the first idea and who ran with it and who grew it, and just
Yeah.
like how long was that process, and was it? I got to imagine it was fun. You know, can you
Yeah,
talk?
how'd you get Jimmy to leave WDST?
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, I think Jimmy and I got to know each other over it for sure 2 years, and I'm going to look for a nod from Jimmy if that's about right.
By
Because
the way, everybody, Jimmy has now moved from when you first saw him into, I guess, Studio One, is that what we call it? Or what,
It's the Air Studio.
the on-air studio, and
Yeah.
because that show ended at 10 o'clock and now it's 10:13 in the morning, and he is now in the studio. The station is broadcasting from another room, and we'll talk about that later. So that's why you saw him shift. I'm sorry.
yeah, no. So I did a cover of Tears for Fears song "Shout," and Jimmy heard that through a friend. I never met Jimmy before, and Jimmy said, "Why don't you come on the show at DST and we'll talk about the song?" And it was clearly a match made in radio heaven or something, because we started talking and Jimmy suggested I'd come in on a regular basis. Which at first meant, the driving to DST and before the sun came up, and talking in between commercial breaks and songs and things, and just getting into conversations and then having to stop. And so then we started a regular show for a
The
while.
exact opposite of what happens now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so, then we got into a regular show for quite some time. And again, just recognizing that there was a like-mindedness here beyond the fact that the first 4 letters of our last name are the same. That there might be something to this idea of a local station. And then, the impetus was just the 2 of us sitting down and what would this look like? Are there stations in the area? What's possible, basically? And then someone at Novo at some point going, wait, what? You're going to buy a radio station? And then again, like the creative process, we figured it out as we went along and kind of bumbled along for a while in terms of how do you put a budget together? How do you, because this was a brand new startup.
Is that
and yet-
Milwaukee station also set up in the same way? You're supporting it 24/7 without advertising?
No. It's while it is definitely a local community station, they do have a lot of underwriting. Milwaukee's, over 500,000 people.
Yeah,
probably
that's
2 million.
different.
Yeah, so it can run on its own, which is great. We still support it in a way, but we're not the sole funder by any means.
So it's safe to say this was absolutely a new model for you.
Yeah.
You have to research it and sort it through and figure it out.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
was that hard or challenging? Or?
I'm looking to Jimmy to see what the look on his face is.
We'll ask you when Peter leaves. We're going to ask you.
Yeah, exactly. You ask Jimmy when I'm gone, because nothing that feels purposeful feels hard to me. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not difficult, but if you're in it for the purpose behind it and all that drives it, it's exhilarating, really, in a lot of ways, even when it is hard. So it was a lot of things, but I'm sure glad we're here.
Well, it is 10:16 East Coast. I promised Peter a hard 10:15. He gave us 2 extra minutes. Super thanks. I know you are very busy. As someone who has lived up here all my life in the Hudson Valley, obviously, thank you for the support. And I'm kind of involved with Peter in 1 or 2 other things as well. So thank you. And
and thank you. It was a thrill to know that you were here as well, because like I said, I knew the reputation of the firm for decades. And so to know that you were a neighbor and that you could get involved was fantastic. So very much appreciated.
There you go. So we'll let you leave, and we promise to not say too many strange things about you. Now we can really get to work. Okay.
Exactly. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, great. So Jimmy, you're just going to take over. Okay. let's talk about goals, aspirations of the studio, the dream, and you can do it from whatever lens you want to. But sooner or later, we want to get into some architecture and the building. This is for the AES, so we want to share with people what the physical station has become, and of course what the technical part of the physical station has become. So I'm going to hand it over to you for a little bit.
You know, when we came in 4 years ago to buy WKNY, Radio Kingston Corporation bought WKNY, the radio station had been on the air for many, many, many years. In fact, in December, it will celebrate 82 years on the air in Kingston.
Am I right? It's one of, if not the oldest AM station in the Hudson Valley, or?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the oldest AM radio stations. And of course, we now also have an FM signal as well, which came along a couple of years after we came in. And, you know, it went on the air December 16th, 1939. I don't think much was happening in 1939. Was something happening in the world? You know, and from that moment it went on the air until now, every international, national, and local piece of information has flowed through the broadcast tower. Less than a mile. I actually can see the tower from these new studios over some buildings. And the world and the community has come through speakers to people in Kingston through WKNY that entire time. And when we came in, there was a lineup of local hosts on the weekend, and the radio station was syndicated 3/4 of the time through Westwood One, the rest of the time. And so we immediately ended that agreement with Westwood One, and we started populating those spaces with local hosts. We had a public meeting at the library. We made the opportunity available for people to pitch shows. There were some selected people we approached who we thought would be good voices on the air. And, you know, within 6 months, we had 35 new shows on the air. We maintained everyone who was here, largely. The people who had been doing work, like Warren Lawrence, who is, I think, in over Kale's shoulder there at his desk now, having wrapped up his morning show, has been with the radio station.
This, of course, was happening in the old facility, which
across the street.
Not much to speak of, in the back of a laundromat, not too far from the new one, but
yeah, may not have been much to look at, but it sure did a lot of great work over the years. And Warren was there, you know, when we moved here a couple months ago. Warren had been in 718 Broadway for 35 years. He had been in those studios for 35 years. It was the second location he had been in. And I think this is the fourth location that WKNY has been in. And, you know, we have people on the air like Warren, who is celebrating 48 years in March. We've got people who have been here over 50 years. We have an extraordinary lineup of shows. Our polka show has been on the air for 73 years.
Yeah, look at this. The lineup is extraordinary. It's being flashed here. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, our polka show has been on the air for 73 years this past April, and it's only had 2 hosts in the entire time. So, you know, being architects, maybe you can understand this analogy. I tell it to people and they sometimes don't get it. But in New York City, you can sell the air rights over a building, right? And you can build a modern skyscraper over a brownstone that has existed in that location for 150 years. And that's sort of like what we did with the programming here. We had the legacy programming, and then we brought in all these people who had no access to this platform prior for a variety of reasons. And we now have
more than one language too, by the way, right?
Yeah. You know, it was important for us to open the radio station to the first ever daily Spanish language radio program in the city's history, and that continues. Kingston has at least 20% of the population with Spanish as their language. Right. And we know that reporting for a variety of reasons is underreported, you know, that kind of, and so it's probably a larger population. It's estimated that 30% of Kingston will be Spanish speaking by 2030. And so, you know, it was important for us to do that as well. And so we're now over 50 shows, something like 70 different contributors, content creators here at the radio station. And now in a permanent home. We, you know, prior to this, the radio station leased. They didn't own any of the buildings they were in. Right. And after 35 years across the street, here we are at 693 Broadway in this historic building.
Is it safe to say that at 24/7 content, a lot of those content creators had not done this before? That's a pretty safe sentence, right?
Most of them hadn't.
Hadn't. Right?
Yes, had not.
Wow.
Most of the people didn't come in with any broadcast experience. And, you know, I've been in radio myself for over 35 years. And it was kind of refreshing to come in and give people some basics and some guide rails and some, we have a code of on-air ethics, and then let them go. And one of the things that's been compelling to me after being in broadcast for so long is the advent of the podcast. And it taught me that the fundamentalism of programming can be a little bit looser. So people don't have to always be prepackaged in a radio way, and people will still listen. And so, we had some people who came in and, they've heard radio and how it was done in their mind's eye, and that's how they wanted to do it. And other people we had to guide a little bit, but by and large, most of the people on the air, I was surprised within 6 months at how good the programming was. I was like, maybe it's not so hard to do radio. We continually, work with hosts and talk to them and give them feedback. But by and large, again, the programming has
And
done.
Matt, can you bring up
remarkable.
either a Google map or something? Just give everybody a sense of where this is in the world and the outside of the building. You think you can, while Jimmy continues.
Yeah. Jimmy, is there a vetting process to those hosts and trying to
We have
onboard
a-
them and-
Yeah, we have a tab on our homepage where you can submit an idea for a show. And if the idea is compelling, we invite you in for a conversation and maybe another conversation. And we kind of check in with the intent of the program and go over, again, what our perspective is as a radio station. And if there is alignment and there's room on the schedule, we then move forward from there. And it usually involves official onboarding, which I think we're probably the only community radio station in America that provides a stipend for show hosts. They get compensated for their time. And we go through some training, some basic training, and then people launch a radio show.
If I could just put a finer point on the Radio Kingston difference here. I had no background in radio myself. I had done recording studio engineering, design, live technical production, live streaming, every form of technical production except work in radio. Because honestly, my experience of radio was radio, we'll sell you something. And like, it just wasn't interesting from a human level. And when Radio Kingston was created, Jimmy led a vision of humans sharing their experience of the world, right? And that was what radio should be. It was the people's airwaves, right? And that was the vision for Radio Kingston. And so in the teaching of these folks who have come from the community about how to do radio, he advises, if you make a mistake on the air, don't worry, talk about it. Actually share that vulnerability with people. And we have found a real love in the community that it is not commercial. It's not trying to be perfect. It's not trying to sell you something. It's trying to share you something. You're trying to share the vulnerability of the human experience of the world. And that was why I got involved in a whole world of broadcasts I had never cared about. And I think it is a really special thing to celebrate.
Do you have a show? Are you an on-air personality?
I'm actually not. I'm the technical director. I am planning a live music show once our music studio, our performance studio is done.
Yeah.
It will be a live music show. But it's really about the people connecting with each other. And when people ask me, tell me about Radio Kingston, I say, we call it a radio station, but it's really a platform for human connection with a transmitter. Now, and that has been led, Jimmy has taught us how to do radio that way, really by saying, be yourself, share your honest human experience. There happens to be a microphone in front of you, but share that with the world. That's what the world needs. It doesn't need more radio.
Well, let's talk about let's dive into the building, because I mean, this is an AES presentation and that's really what they want to see. We've got our background established. Matt, maybe you could start by
Yep.
let's see if we can get an exterior shot really quick. This is before everybody was seeing where this is. It's right in the heart of Kingston, one of the oldest cities in New York. Actually, it was capital of New York for a while in revolutionary times. And not far off the Hudson River. It's about 90 miles north of New York. And in an old building, what was the history on this building?
It was built in 1855 by a fellow named Robert Bonesteel. There was a octagonal house building fad that was sweeping the nation, led by a fellow out of Fishkill, New York, named Orson Fowler. And there were a lot of reasons for the 8 sides of the building. Some of it had some pseudoscience, spiritual stuff attached to it. Some of it was fundamental and like functional. Orson Fowler suggested that the woman of the house could
That's much better.
maximize her efforts if she was working from a center and out. She wouldn't have to walk as much to clean the house. Of course, that was 1855. And it was built on what was then Union Street, is now Broadway, the main thoroughfare in Kingston. And by late 1880s, 25 years in, there had been extensions put off the back, those two extensions off the backside of the building. So it had gone from an octagon, which it still is, with those two wings added on. And it was a series of private residences along the way. And at some point, it became commercial property. In the early 1960s, it was an appliance store. The appliance store put in two giant windows in the front to display refrigerators and washers and dryers, and eventually became a pretty well-renowned nightclub here in Kingston called the Fountain Lounge. A lot of people have said, "Oh, you're in the old Fountain Lounge. Boy, do I have some stories from that place." And then it went, and its last incarnation was as a hair salon, Tangle's Hair Salon, which had a couple apartments up on the second floor. And that business no longer thrived, and it eventually ended up in the hands of the city of Kingston for non-payment of taxes. And we bought it at a tax auction in November 2017.
I think it's those windows that, for me, that was the driving. For me, that was one of the larger compelling ideas. Why don't we just stay? Yeah. Let's just stay on that for a second.
Our board president, Michael Blumenthal, was walking past this building one afternoon, summer of 2017, when the sale hadn't yet been completed, but we were certain it was going to go through. And he looked up, and he hadn't ever noticed this building before. And he looked at it and said, "Wow, look at those windows." And we, myself and Peter and Kale, and then you shortly thereafter, John, all went, "Oh, put the radio station on Broadway, where the city can see radio being made, and we can see the city happening outside the windows, and maybe it'll inspire people to walk in and say, 'Hey, can I be part of this thing?'" And I think the most amazing thing of this entire, and we can get into, I know, the mechanicals and stuff, but the most amazing thing for us here is that the theory of planting us in this spot has come to fruition. What we thought it would be like is what it's like. To stand in the spot that I'm standing in right now and to be able to look at these windows and watch Broadway go by in either direction is remarkable. I mean, I do a weather report now, and the weather actually happens right afterwards. It's a little freaky because you're like, "Oh, did I actually make that happen? Or am I just seeing it happen at the same time?" But we see our neighbors here in Kingston walking by all the time, and it has changed. It really is the thing that we thought would happen, and it's so nice that it actually did happen.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. We as a company had done this a few times before, most famously for WETA, which is Washington, D.C.'s NPR station. We put their #1 on-air studio with a giant window to the outside, but it's to the outside, but not to Broadway, not to a main street in the city. I mean, for those who are not familiar with Kingston, Broadway is the spine, the sort of commercial spine of the city. It is not the most glorious part of Kingston. It's a little, it's an edgy demographic, which in fact I like, and I know in my heart that Novo and the station likes. I think it's important that Jimmy's looking out, but I think it's just as important that people are looking in. And I agree with you. I've driven by a number of times en route to Kingston. We only live about 15 minutes away, and there's a big performance venue only a few blocks away. There are restaurants in Kingston that you'll go to, and it's fun to now see the radio station working. But it was a challenge. We'll talk about that in a minute. Obvious acoustic challenge, obvious isolation challenge, even some lighting challenges. But I think you're right, Jimmy. It is fun a few years later to actually have verification that what you thought might happen might happen.
Yeah, I would say that being in Midtown Kingston was an imperative for us. I don't know that we consider this as an edgy neighborhood. These are our neighbors, and
Yeah.
these are the people who get overlooked. And as gentrification takes hold here in Kingston, they are the most vulnerable and at-risk people. Uptown Kingston, the historic area, the Stockade District, is what it is, and down on the river, on the Rondout, is what it is. And too often people use this spine of Broadway to hopscotch over the heart and soul of the city, the working people, the working poor, the people who need the most support. And you know, one of the great things is that the city has redone Broadway, and it's almost complete, but there are benches now out on these newly.
Everybody should note the picture that you're looking at now. We're going to flash forward to what it looks like. This is a while ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, this was when we originally started.
right. And now
Yep.
this is just about complete, and Broadway has taken a huge turn for the better with sidewalks and benches and whatnot.
It depends on who you ask. People don't
Oh,
like
that's true.
change. I'm such a fan of the work that has been done. There's a new traffic circle in Kingston that the New York State put in, and the Broadway Streetscape project is remarkable to me. There are, you know, again, people are not always accepting of change. I think 10 years from now, people will say that was visionary of the city to change Broadway in the way that they did. They went from 4 lanes to 3 with a turning lane in the middle, with a bike lane running down one side in 2 directions, a really compelling new parking design, and to watch it happen outside the radio station as the construction was going on. To not hear the construction in these studios, but to feel it through our feet, again, was amazing.
And by feeling, the only time you mean that is when the excavators outside were pounding on the ground to tamp it down, was the only time that you could feel it. But when dump trucks or fire trucks drove by,
you're like, easy does it. This building has just been repointed. Easy does it.
No, Jimmy is right now in On Air 1, and I assume not here. Cars are zooming by, and it's a busy day in Kingston, and obviously not affecting
Kristen
them.
and Kale can attest to when we were before we actually moved in, we would take people into this studio or the talk studio, and we would close the door, and we'd say, "Hear that?" and you wouldn't hear a thing. And we're like, exactly. It was the quietest studios I've ever been in my life.
could you spin your camera, Jimmy? Is that possible?
I can. I know that Kale is concerned about the lighting, so I'll do my best. So
We've got some little webcams in for right now, but we're adding a lot of actual broadcast cameras as we add neutral density filter to the windows.
Yep.
So that we really get the visual of people at the table. That's the talk studio over on the right-hand side of Jimmy's frame. You can just barely see it. And then you see how the light is changing there. We're adding Roscoe shades with neutral density film so that the cameras, there's Marielle on the air right now doing La Voz.
And we are
currently Jimmy is right here.
Right there. The street is to the top of this drawing.
Yep.
The windows are, as you see them on the drawing, pretty obvious. And then number 2, or I guess On Air 2, we could just call it that. That is literally on air right now, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not supposed to be building a studio in the middle of the street renovation, but such was,
timing being what it was, the pandemic, it all just worked out. You know how we do a traffic report here at Kingston, at Radio Kingston. We look out the window and we say, and there goes a white car, and there goes a silver van, and there goes a red SUV. All right, traffic is fine.
Are you kidding, or is that what you do?
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
Just did it.
I just did it. Yeah.
Right. While we're on the plan, if you could just shrink it so that we can see the whole floor. Jimmy may take us through the rest of the first. It's basically a 2-story building, although the basement is super exciting, and we will have some photos of that. I actually think that the basement is amazing. And we have but on the main floor.
The basement is and I'm sure, I think I saw a photo earlier, the juxtaposition of 166-year-old stack stone foundation paired up with Tesla the Tesla wall is amazing.
Well,
right?
let's just,
That's why I love this photo.
Yeah.
yeah. And Matt, well, just before we go back up to the first floor, what did we have to do to get this? This was not easy.
No, so this was actually dug down, as you can see in
Right.
this photo here. This stack of stone is the original dry stack foundation.
And the level
To
of
get-
the original floor? The
Yes,
level of the
this is
original
what held
floor?
up the original floor, but it was also what the basement level was.
Oh,
So to
wow.
get head height where you could actually walk into this space, we had to excavate down an additional 24 inches by hand, because as it turns out, this was all sand. So we couldn't get machines down here. So this was, the basement itself was, dug out by hand, an additional 24 inches to give us head height and room for all the mechanical and equipment that was needed. What you're looking at in this photo is I guess the electric showroom that we wanted to display.
That's our building wide UPS in the center there. And that's a 18 kW building wide UPS for all our mission critical systems. And then that is backed up by 3 Tesla power walls supported by all of our solar panels. The idea of this station is that it will serve the people come what may. Those zombies invade, we are going to be all right. And we have a backup generator supporting the whole facility as well. So if the Tesla power walls were to go out, grid fails, power walls go out, UPS dies, generator still kicks in.
How long will the Tesla Powerwall could go for how many hours or days, or what do you think?
So it depends on how much we're using, but our feeling so far testing, we've really only had it active for about a month now, but we've probably got about a day of power in with only mission critical systems
Mhm.
in the 3 power walls right now.
Right. This is a great shot showing showing all the centuries involved here.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And that was, Matt, about 4 feet of material that was taken out in some places in wheelbarrows by Miguel Alvarado's team.
Yeah.
Kudos to that. Those are our amazing builders. Anyway, let's go up to that floor. So the basement is not for the public, but I'm sure people have been taken down there. Broadway is to the top, the main street, the main entrance. Actually, Jimmy, you take us through the station. I think it's more appropriate for you to do that, if you would.
Yeah, actually, I'll turn it over to Kale to take us through that first floor, since there's a lot of tech involved as well.
Yeah.
Sure. We've got 3 main studios there, starting sort of
Excuse me
counterclockwise.
1 second. I want to introduce us to Kristen Thorne, wave, thank you, who has just joined us, the station business manager, and we knew she would be coming in a little late. Thank you for joining, and we'll.
Thank you for having me.
You missed Peter Buffett giving us his vision and then leaving quickly so we could talk about him. Me mispronouncing everybody's name, which that's just me. And now we're going to take a tour through the station. Sorry.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Radio Kingston has 3 directors, Kristen, Jimmy, and myself. We manage everything sort of together with consensus and meetings, and it's been really successful from the very beginning. Really grateful to be part of this team. Taking a look at the map here, starting at 9 o'clock, if the core hexagon or octagon rather is 9 o'clock. Well, that's our entryway right there in our vestibule and our reception area. There's a bathroom on the right when you walk in and stairs to go down. We've got a elevator there, as you can see, which has been a fun experience. The elevator goes to the basement and to the top. Accessibility is a really important part of our station because it is about all the voices in the community. So accessibility has been key in all of the planning. There is a lounge at number 11 in the middle. So as you come into the station, you're presented with 2 doors into the main airlocks and the lounge. Yep, there's a picture of the lounge there. Kristen selected all of the cladding. The wood is oak, which was charred by hand here by our team. Kristen and I actually got in there with a flamethrower and got to char some of that wood ourselves. And then you see the sound locks at number 6 and number 6. That's the sound lock into the talk studio there. The talk studio control room is at number 3 at 9 o'clock on the octagon. And number 2 is our talk studio, where we have seating for 6 and 6 Shure SM7 microphones.
And that's live right now as we speak.
That's right. Mariel Fiore is in there with an engineer in the Talk Studio control room. That studio is used when you have hosts who are not doing their own engineering. And our Air Studio is really for mostly for hosts who are doing their own engineering, folks like Jimmy Buff and Warren Lawrence and others who are engineering themselves. And that studio at number 1 there, 1 o'clock on the clock face, is has a performance stage, a small little nook there where we could have, you know, when the pandemic feels safe, we could have 2 or 3, maybe 4 musicians tucked in there in a classic studio environment. We're set up with actually 4 headphone mixes, one of the only radio stations where we'll be able to, that I've heard of, where we'll be able to, yep, there we can see it there. Great photo. Thanks for that, Matt. We've got some SAS radio turrets, but we have the ability to do 4 separate headphone mixes. You can see we're still doing some wiring.
Got a lot of recording studios don't even have that.
It's the first radio studio I've ever been in my, and I can tell you, musicians come to play in a radio station and they say, "Can you get a separate mix in my headphone?" We're like, "Nope,
nope.
You get the stereo out. You get what we get." And it's going to be amazing to say yes when they ask that question.
Well, this is recording studio. You know, this is high level studio specs. It's fantastic, but you haven't used it yet, right? I guess pandemic is not.
We're still finishing up that performance area. Okay. We did some late modifications. Mm-hmm. We added some additional Dante ports and a few other things. And, you know, frankly, we haven't been able to bring people into the studios to do that type of work. So we sort of pushed some of those parts into the latter stages of the project, and we're still in them. But yeah, you can see there a shot from the performance stage, and that's where Jimmy is standing right now in front of that console, looking out that big window with that EV RE20 with a mic flag on that big arm, that Yellow Tech mica arm. Yep, there's a nice close-up. We're using Sierra Automated Systems consoles throughout, which are all based in the Dante protocol. In fact, the entire facility is a Dante facility, and our whole mini campus will be a Dante campus as well. And you can see our automation system there, which is Zeta by RCS. And there's a lot of other key equipment throughout. But to continue the tour, I don't know if you want to go back to the map there. Continuing around clockwise, you'll see at number 5, we've got our engineering room, affectionately known as the rack room. But Technical Operations Center is one term for it. It's 4 44 space racks that handle all of the IT infrastructure. So all the IT routing, we've got almost 24 Ubiquity 48 port switches in there. The IT is a huge backbone of the infrastructure of the system because everything is audio over IP, plus all of our business LAN, our VoIP. We ran a lot of dry lines for future use, and all of our video systems all use Ethernet as well. We ran Cat 6A through the whole facility because it's rated for 10 gigs and we wanted to future proof. So Matt's in the corner there of the room, and you can see that's rack 4 with most of our audio specific gear. We've got a couple of microwave STLs, studio to transmitter links. We have a small dish on the roof that sends our audio over to the transmitter. We have both a primary and a secondary for redundancy transmitter there. Those are those 2 big devices you can see at the top of the rack.
The tower is how far away?
Tower's about, as the crow flies, a quarter mile or so away. It's a 300-foot guide tower, and we replaced that actually early on with a solid core tower, same height, and that's out on a 4-acre parcel. Looks like Matt's going to bring us there through the power of the internets, and so. Yeah, that is out over on Albany Avenue behind Congregation Emmanuel. And it's it's in kind of a low point there. So it's behind Congregation Emmanuel. There it says WKNY Radio Tower. Yep. That's our 4-acre parcel where we have a small transmitter building where the signal is received by another parabolic antenna that's on the actual tower itself. Beautiful, Matt, where it's like we're there in a drone.
We are there.
You can't actually see the tower, but there's our transmitter building. And that entire field is full of solar panels now because another adjunct project for the radio station. And there have been a few of those as we've been on our mission here, because I think Jimmy said, what if we put solar panels in that field and provided that power to our community? And we're in the process of finishing up that project as well right now. So current photos would show that almost that entire field full of solar panels.
The solar panels on the roof of the station building, we saw it in a rendering, they're not enough to power the building, correct?
That's right. Not quite enough to power the building, but it will help us in a variety of different ways, actually.
Takes the edge off.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Jimmy really wanted to be able to say to the people, like right now we are running on the power of the sun. That was a goal. And, we're just about there, I think. So anyway, that's our transmitter building. And
let's go back to the plan. There we go. It's a good view of the panels on the station building itself.
Do
Yeah,
you
that's-
have an indicator of that? Like if you're an engineer, Jimmy, if you're on the air, is there like a diode or a readout or a widget on your computer that says, sun's out and really we're cranking the power into the station, like that sort of thing?
I think, Kale, you have that, right?
yeah, we have apps to monitor both the Tesla Powerwall's state, but also the inverters that we're using have a more granular view on the energy consumption and the efficiency of those systems. And we're starting to take a look at that. And we haven't yet put in Jimmy's giant green lever, which he wanted to throw to be able to be running on the power of the sun, but we're getting there. There's a few things left to finish up.
It's actually functional as opposed to, or not just performative. We can actually stay on the air with a solar powered tower and a solar powered studio.
Yeah.
If the grid goes down, if something ever catastrophic happened, we could still get information out to the community that way. And
both facilities are either backed up by battery, and if the battery goes, you have fuel. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Now,
if fuel
Jimmy,
ran
what
out,
happens if you produce more power than you're using?
You send it back to the grid.
yeah, it goes to the grid, and
Right.
you can
Goes to
build
grid.
credits with Central Hudson.
Yep. And that's part of the community solar program that you're part of, correct?
Yeah, those are the details we're working out now with SunCommon, who did the solar installation in Central Hudson.
Nice. Continuing.
Continuing around at number 4, we have our production studio, where our imaging director, Ida Hakala, and members of the production team produce a lot of the community messages that come out of the station. So we don't have, strictly speaking, commercial advertising, but we, as part of our community support, welcome in, the events of the community, the offerings of the community, and the creation of a PSA or a message to the community is being produced here in the production studio, also with an SAS console. This studio could go live on the air if we wanted to as well, but it is primarily used to tell the stories of the community and to bring the offerings of
All the rooms can become on-air studios, correct, if they have to.
That's right. Yep.
If you go back to the plan, and I don't know if we're going to get into the weeds here, if you blow up the entire plan a little bit, you don't have to be too quick to see the double and triple walls. This is, of course, what's giving the isolation. These are all room within room installations. Even between on-air 1 and on-air 2, those are critical. So that's a triple wall, acoustic glass, et cetera, et cetera. We'll take a look at a detail of that. I don't know if we'll do it while we're on air here, but we'll take a look at it. There's a quick peek.
This is
Pretty
the
complicated,
exterior.
actually. Pretty tricky to get all this big glass, not have flutter echo, not so easy. That's the angle. Room for shades, 3 different sets of shades. And still have these rooms give the required reverb time that we need for intelligibility for an on-air performance. It was actually quite the challenge.
Yeah. Which I think everybody can hear with Jimmy recording live from one of the studios right now.
There's a lot of glass in these rooms.
You can't hear that glass though. The studios sound fantastic. They're some of the best sounding rooms I've ever been in my life. You can hear the sound of the blood in your own head. They're so quiet, or you can fill them with wonderful music or have an incredible conversation looking out at Kingston, but not actually hearing Kingston.
So Matt, you want to jump up to the second floor plan? Maybe Kristen could take us through there. That's the sort of business part of the floor.
Yeah, coming up the stairs.
Kristen,
we're getting close.
show us, continue the tour, please, if you will.
Sure, it would be my pleasure. Yeah, so here we are, the view that Matt just shared going up the stairs. So that was a shot of 21, which is a little vestibule with a bathroom, changing tables in both, just to highlight more accessibility to make the space as functional as possible for as many different types of people as possible, including little humans in the future when we can welcome them back. So then as you come into 19, this is our printer area, and we were able to create some beautiful built-in shelving that was all reclaimed wood from the original structure of the building. So it's finished beautifully, and we really put a lot of those touches, reclaiming as many materials as we could throughout the process. So all on the second floor, all of the window casings and a fair portion of the baseboards are all made from wood that was original to the space. So yeah, there they are.
Beautiful, really nice.
Yeah. And so each space has a different theme aesthetically. The second floor is our garden. Yeah, and there's another beautiful, we have these barn doors, and the pocket doors in the bathrooms are also reclaimed wood, as well as the shade in the conference room, which we'll see in a little bit. So that door closes, and all of that framing around the door that you see is all original from the original build of the building. It was really beautiful just to have the warmth of the wood in this space. So here's a view into our main office space, where we currently have 12 full-time staff sharing this space. And yeah, right there on 15. 13 and 14 are private workstations. 13 is the operations office and 14 is the technical office. Also with glass doors to create visibility and a sense of open space, while also having some private, quiet space to work on mission critical functions. Here we can see, and there's our colleague Nate working at his desk. And so the second floor is a garden, and that's the intention. It's intended to be a warm, fertile place where beautiful ideas can blossom and manifest. This is a piece that we had commissioned by a local artist, Maria Elena Ferrer Harrington. And we gave her a couple of different themes to work with, and this is what she came up with. This is an acoustic panel, and so there are decorative acoustic panels throughout the space, and this one is in our main office area. Appropriately, we're calling this one the Gardeners, and she was able to mix elements, textile elements and other cultural elements from various communities within the community of Kingston. So we see this in the flowers and in the trees and in the colors, and then this beautiful constellation of humans tending the garden of our community.
And there's an
And she
outdoor,
also-
it's kind of like an outdoor balcony almost, right? I think.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and this shot is looking from towards the kitchen, back towards the printer station, and there's the kitchen as well. The kitchen was really fun and challenging and important. We really wanted to have a space where we could make food together and nourish each other that way as well. And so it was important to have a full functioning kitchen in this station. And one of our staff, Angelica, when we were first meeting with her, we asked her about problem solving. It's a question of how do you build camaraderie in the team and problem solve together. And she said, she made a beautiful statement around cooking food. We take a break and we make food together and we work that way. Excellent. We're going to have a kitchen in the future. So we've had a few meals, but the kitchen hasn't been fully deployed, but it works. And it's so nice to be able to cook and to eat together.
Very, very. What's the reaction of your staff? I realize the times are a little strange with the pandemic, but it looks like people are going in. How's the space been received by staff?
So far, so good. There are a lot of little surprises that we put in throughout the space. The chalkboard paint in the kitchen being one of them. You can see some writing on the wall there. So we can make shopping lists or leave notes to each other and have some, yeah, clementines, I put a note, straws are next to the sink when we moved things. But so far it's been received very well, and we did our best to design an intuitive space, and that goes to the placement of where the coffee cups are in the kitchen. Where do you think a spoon would be? it's right there. And we attempted to create that level of intuitiveness and also care throughout the entire facility. So everything that is needed, as much as can be, is accessible right at your fingertips. And it's very nourishing and nurturing. And a lot of the feedback I've received is that people don't want to leave. You know, when they come in, it feels so good to be there that they want to stay there. And that's very rewarding.
Thanks. Matt, can you just jump to the unshare so we see each other? We have a small time crunch because the AES will squash us down. They're only going to give us so much time. I would like to go into 2 or 3 different discussions. One is the use of Dante. Could you just talk about that a little bit? You could get as weedy as you want on this, because the people watching this are going to be very interested in that, and how your decision to use this, and is this a good idea, bad idea, overkill, underkill? Want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I'll take that. There is a lot to talk about there. When we started planning the studios, it was 2018.
Yeah.
And I think it was really becoming clear at about that time, at least it became clear for me, that Dante had kind of won the audio over IP protocol. They were the
I
VHS.
think everybody I think there's pretty good agreement on that. Yeah.
So just seeing how much was Dante enabled at the conferences that I was attending at that time, I decided to become Dante certified. And this was before the pandemic. I actually had to go to Amsterdam to do that. And it was really illuminating as a person who had built a number of recording studios before, and every single project had underestimated the amount of tie lines that were needed, underestimated the format of some of those lines, to be able to put in Cat6 infrastructure, and then to be able to put any device into a primary and secondary port and have all of that IO available, meant that we were going to have an incredibly flexible space. And it meant that every input in the facility was available anywhere that you wanted on the crosspoint map.
Yeah.
And because we have multiple buildings as well, it meant that the routing from our performance studio or from other buildings, the use of which had not fully been articulated by leaning on Dante and building a Dante network, it meant that we would have that flexibility in the future. But it also means that the IT infrastructure, as in many projects like this these days, I'm sure you can attest, John, and your team can, that IT infrastructure has become so much more important than it ever was. Fortunately, I did have a background in software development and engineering and IT. So one of the main things that we did early on was to plan out that network. We actually air gapped every single, based on what Dante does, the primary and secondary networks are completely air gapped for redundancy. We actually did that with the rest of our networks as well, so that we could separate traffic in really as granular a way as possible. We haven't actually needed to do that. We found that Dante has been incredibly flexible. And that was something I learned through my certification, that actually one of the biggest challenges of a Dante network is that IT professionals will overthink and put in lots of traffic shaping protocols that actually aren't beneficial. But we wanted to ensure that because we were installing so much cable in this project, we wanted to ensure that that investment was.
So has that completely replaced traditional copper, or is every connectivity a Dante connection, period, end of conversation?
Almost every single connection is in this facility is through Dante. We have analog audio lines running on an individual studio basis from the microphones to the Rio Bravos that are the local IO. But out of those local IO panels with analog ins and outs, we have it's Dante primary and secondary back to the rack room. Same thing in the talk studio. We have a few analog lines running to the control room, but really everything else is Cat6 and Cat6A wiring.
While we're talking about this, Matt, could you bring up the overview of showing the other buildings? Because one of the things I want to discuss is the future, as undefined or defined as it is. There are 2 other buildings in the station's plans.
3
actually. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
3. Yeah. And the radio station is of course up there.
Less a station, more a campus at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then either you want to share with us where you think these buildings are heading. Some of the plans have changed a little bit during the few years that since when we started, but they're all here on the drawing. What's the current plan?
Well, we have 4-inch PVC running underground to all these buildings so that whatever the plans are, we'll be able to be interconnected.
Right.
In the drawing, you've indicated service station on the left there. That's 695 Broadway, a parcel that became connected with our parcel and became available midway through the project.
We call it a service station because it was a service station.
Yep, it was a service station, and that will become a performance studio capable of holding, 65 people, as you've indicated in your drawings, in one mode. But it was really important to us to create a multi-use space. So the stage will not be permanent. It will be stage decks. We can have a dance party there. We can provide it for use to the Hodge Center, which is a building next to our facility, which has after-school programs for kids. We've imagined a lot of different types of uses for the space. In the performance studio, there's a small broadcast control room, very small, which you can see the 3 seats there. And then that's behind the sort of front of house mix position. But we're excited to build this facility and then see how the community receives it. All of our space is really for the community. So we're anticipating providing it for community conversations, town hall.
You will connect that with Dante, maybe some copper or just.
There'll be a fiber line, 2 of them connecting so that we can have a primary and secondary switch in that facility. And we're going to be carrying all of our network connectivity, including our VoIP and business LAN and everything else, so that we can broadcast from there, broadcast on the internet and broadcast on the radio.
Then let's talk about the Garage Annex. That's the sort of southwest, that building there, which was going to be this little performance space, but changed.
Yeah, the Garage Annex was our original effort at a performance studio, but was pretty small, actually, unfortunately. And we needed to put in bathrooms. We needed to accommodate a number of accessibility features, and really proved to be too small for that. So as currently imagined, this will be support for the performance studio, the service station, by storing all of our backline. Those double doors will go out to a covered walkway, so we can bring in a drum set, bring in an organ to the performance space when needed. And it's our hope that we will find a way to navigate some of the accessibility issues, and that might make this space in the future suitable for use as another studio space. We've had a lot of kids from the community come out asking to record hip hop in our studios, which we're not currently optimized for, but we're imagining that this could be a place where we could do some actual audio recording. And it's a cool space. It has 2 stories. Half of the building is double height, and we might do some community conversations in there, or we might be able to record a really great drum set and be able to explore this work with the kids of the community that have come out asking for that. And that's the type
of that building, Matt. Is it easy to get one that shows that building with relationship to the station, or maybe we'll just splice that in if you can't get that. Really.
You mean this one?
Yeah, just some photos that sort of show these buildings.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
The front of that building,
I noticed all the way down on the lower right.
That's the one that we're currently working on. And I would ask Kristen maybe to talk a little bit more about 13 Franklin Street. She's been working on it really intensely and leading that with the project manager.
What's going to happen in that building?
Team.
Yeah, this is a community meeting space. So the first floor is open. It's an open floor plan. This building is also constructed in the early 1900s. I want to say 1908, but I don't know if that's exactly correct. And we have attempted to adaptively reuse this structure as well. But it needed some upgrades, some structural upgrades. We have an LVL going through the attic here, which allowed us to open up the first floor entirely. So that first floor is intended to be a meeting space for staff, to also facilitate after-school programming with the Hodge Center, and be available broadly to community members and organizations for small events and programming there as well. Maybe a little movie screening, a conference, a lunch in the future. The second floor is going to have 2 semi-private office spaces, and we're wiring this building as well so that those rooms could be used for editing suites in the future. possibly podcast production up there as well, maybe some audio post. So they'll be lightly treated, but the main function is human gathering in this space. It's also going to have a loft on the second floor, which we're going to make a nap nook, a siesta loft, I think is the going phrase for it. So it's intended to be, again, a warm, nurturing space where everyone feels welcome to gather and collaborate.
Ultimately, Kristen, is the idea that, of course, post-pandemic, that people can arrive and take a tour and be part of events here and like actually really interact with all these spaces, right? That's
the goal eventually. Yeah. And we've been working very thoughtfully on landscaping and hardscaping designs to create a broader sense of cohesion and welcome around the campus, so that whatever point you enter on this, so there'll be no fencing. It's going to be completely open on 3 sides to Broadway, Franklin Street, and Liberty Street, so that from wherever point of entry, you feel the connection of the buildings and of the space, and you feel ideally like you belong there too, that it's a place for me, right? It's a place for you, that when you come into the campus, you feel welcome.
Good.
And I want to add one thing to that, which is really cool, in my opinion. Originally, the walkways of our little campus here were going to be bluestone, an homage to the bluestone quarries of the region. But while the Broadway streetscape was being redone, we saw these cement walkways being put in place for the public. And Kristen came up with the idea that, we should really do that exact same style of walkway from the sidewalk right into our facility, the feel of a public welcoming environment. And that is really the story of the space. And I think it's important to emphasize that as much as possible throughout this, that this is the people's facility. That is what we are designing it for.
Matt, if you can unshare your screen. Jimmy has to leave. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'd like to ask 2 more questions, and that's about all the time we have. One, and Kristen, you could take it, or either of the station leaders could take it. Let's talk about the pandemic. People are going to ask about it. As you know, this is going, or as you don't know, the AES convention that this will be presented at was canceled, the actual physical convention, along with many other conventions. But making the virtual presentations, I think, even more important. How have you done? How have you managed it? Where's the silver lining? In fact, I'd be most interested in, did you pick up a silver lining in all of this?
Oh, wow. That's a provocative question. Where is the silver lining of the pandemic? I don't know. But we've done our best to maintain positive community health standards. And for us, that meant shutting it down, quite literally. I mean, not shutting the doors, and supporting our hosts to broadcast remotely via Zoom. So Kale and the tech team were really essential.
And you were able to do that.
We were able to do that, yeah, to get the gear out and to create those connections and integrate them with our systems. Zoom is not the same as being in the state-of-the-art facility, but it's the best. It was the best choice.
Did you have the station provide gear for new podcasters? And
we did, yeah. Most staff received a Scarlett and then a headset mic or some other type of microphone, so they could produce their programs from home. Now that we've moved and we're opening, we have pretty strict policies and protocols of who can come in. So currently only full-time staff, hosts, and contracted hosts are welcome in the space. We have a bit of a scheduling dance around who's in the space when. Everyone is to be fully masked at all times, especially and even in the studios, keeping the mask on when the mic is not live. When the mic is live, pull the mask down, speak, put it back up, doing microphone stocks and cleaners everywhere. Right. So it's a little bit of, hygiene theater to some, but it's really important for us because we are as
Yeah.
safe as possible. We're also requiring that anyone coming into broadcast is vaccinated. And this is because the unique nature of our operations. It's impossible to socially distance in a station, and there is going to be turnover room to room, not enough time, even with the amazing filtration that we have, to really cycle through the air. So again, we're taking every possible precaution, and that also includes guests. So while our hosts may be in the station, guests are calling in or zooming in, as it were.
So I have a final question, and I'm going to throw it out to everybody on our panel.
I wanted to add just
I'm sorry.
to that, to the COVID, what was included in the design that we had was we have all of the studios have their own HVAC systems. So they're all individually filtered. They all have HEPA filters. They all have UV light sanitation, and they all have fresh air intakes. So we also included into design have actual filtration systems. So it's not all just social, dealing with it in that.
Good.
Totally. And just to add on to that, that was a decision that we made before coronavirus was a thing. Air quality and just optimal air quality was a priority for us from the beginning. We also put in mitigation systems for radons and VOCs just as a prophylactic measure to ensure optimum air quality. And even in a regular year, a flu going around a radio station, that can be devastating to programming. So we sort of lucked out in a way. Maybe that's the silver lining. This whole thing is that we planned this amazing HVAC system and needed it.
My one final question, everyone can take it in any order. One thing you would do differently. You get one thing.
COVID's not included, right?
No, I think you can't have COVID in the answer. And no politics. One sort of designy, technical planning, strategy, anything kind of thing you would do differently. They must have learned something in this 4-year adventure. What would you do different if you could do it again?
One thing comes to mind for me pretty easily, which is that it was, this building, the architects of this building never anticipated the level of engineering that we've needed.
Building.
And the energy recovery systems in the very efficient HVAC systems that we're using look like, I call it the Dr. Seuss basement. The piping that is in there was really hard to visualize, would have been impractical even to pre-visualize, but it took up a lot more cubic footage and affected the use of the basement in ways that we couldn't have anticipated. It's hard to know how deep to dig into things like that. But the very modern bleeding edge mechanical systems, there you go, perfect shot of the Dr. Seuss basement. And it's highly efficient. We are very grateful for it, but we had some ideas in mind for how we might be using this space, which needed a little bit more space than we ended up with. It's fine. We moved some equipment like the power walls and the UPS weren't originally going to be outside the room like that. In the end of the day, I'm glad they moved, but learning how to understand a little bit more how those very modern mechanical systems overlap with the electrical systems in order for us to plan some of our use of space better is probably the one thing I would have done differently. It was a new project for us, and these are all new systems for all of us. So
yeah,
that's something I would have done better.
Yeah, thank you. I actually came up with a quick two-part answer, building from what Kale just said. I think having more full team on-site meetings at the beginning for some of these systems and to map things out. A lot of our collaboration was virtual because we had such a large team working on the project, and there were site visits, but I have a curiosity around more site visits to layer on these systems over top of each other and model those a little bit more specifically. Maybe would have made a different outcome. Because the walls and the space, it's fixed. There's and so at the end we came into situations of competing conduit and competing wires, and how is this all gonna Dr. Seuss together? that Dr. Seussing is in the walls too. So that's a curiosity I have. I also would have not done a custom kitchen. I would have done a semi-custom kitchen from like a home store or something. Because I love it, but I also want it to be a little different. But it works great. So.
Matt, you did the heavy lifting. Everybody should know that. You must have one thing you'd like to you want to do over on.
Oh man. Piggybacking off Kristen is to, the most important thing is to keep the communication lines between everybody open. So, even if, you think you're doing a good job of, making sure everybody's up to date and coordinated, I think it would be to communicate more. It's probably better to, overestimate than under in that case. So it would be keeping the line of communications open to make sure that everybody understands what's going on.
Yeah, this was a difficult project. I'm going to answer the question for myself. My answer is, I'm going to give a metaphor. I like that movie with the plane that landed in the Hudson, the Tom Hanks movie. And at the end of the movie, they asked the co-pilot, what would you do different? And the guy said, I'd do it in July instead of January because it was cold, which was his way of saying, I'm not sure if I would have done anything different. I think Peter and Jimmy got us into an adventure that I know from my observations, I don't think anybody had any real idea where this would go. The building's too small for everything we put into it. It's too old. The basement's not tall enough. I said I wouldn't mention pandemic, but that wasn't fair. The builder, who was amazing, had never built a radio station before, which is probably why he stuck it out. Any other builder would have walked off the job probably. And we kind of went into some adventures. I think our studio experience gave us pretty good confidence that the technology would work, the acoustics would work. But there were some moments when, right before the final testing, God, I hope we meet the reverb time requirements. I hope we meet the intelligibility specs. I sure hope we're not hearing the cars. But until you're all done and you run the test, there is a little bit of nervousness. So my answer is, I'm not 100% sure. Probably a good way to end the AES chat. So I thank Peter and Jimmy, even though they're not here anymore. Kristen, Kale, thank you so much. Thank you for allowing us to play in your sandbox and continue to play in your sandbox. And kudos for keeping this station going, keeping its past legacy alive, and also jumping into some exciting future adventures. You're right. I can hardly wait for those other buildings to come online and the campus concept finally get completed. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.